professor of art history and architectural studies here at Connecticut College. I'm going to do a brief introduction to today's events, and then we'll just talk. Thank you very much for coming. So, what was urban renewal? At the end of the Second World War in 1945, the nation's confidence and optimism was at an all-time high. Emerging victorious from the war, the economy given a tremendous boost by wartime mobilization, and with Europe in ruins, the United States was riding at the head of what Time magazine described as the American century. But American cities also faced many problems. Accelerating urbanization through the turn of the century brought tidal waves of rural migrants into urban centers, and by 1937, FDR's National Resources Planning Board had declared that America had finally become a nation of cities. But the cities were 19th century artifacts, labyrinthine, overcrowded, with aging infrastructure and transportation built for the age of railway travel. In 1940, the U.S. Census for the first time showed that the population of suburbs had exceeded that of urban centers. Just 3 years after America had officially become the nation of cities, people started fleeing the cities for the suburbs. With cars becoming more and more affordable, and after 1945, federal mortgage subsidies under the GI Bill, the white middle class was fleeing the city, and industry, retail, and businesses soon followed. Already struggling to modernize, urban centers found themselves being rapidly depleted of their tax base. New London was not immune from this set of processes. A thriving regional center and tourist destination in the 19th century, New London was starting to see young families head out for new homes in smaller nearby towns like Waterford. The city's narrow streets, mainly laid out in the 17th century to accommodate horse-drawn carriages, were now clogged with automobile traffic. Navigating its bustling downtown retail hub became a headache, with traffic jams and no parking. And the larger regional and national retailers threatened to depart for suburban malls. The construction of the Connecticut Turnpike and later I-95, which ran along the shore from the New York State line to Rhode Island, was then underway just south of Hodges Square, promised to not only accelerate the movement of residents and businesses out of the city. In 1949, Congress finally passed legislation in the works since the late 1930s to tackle the urban problems of the mid-century. Title I of the Housing Act of 1949 dedicated large outlays of funds for so-called urban redevelopment programs, which enabled cities to acquire and clear acres of so-called blighted, meaning underdeveloped, low-income, and poorly maintained land for new housing, retail, and other cultural and civic purposes. Urban redevelopment, and which was after 1954 renamed urban renewal, and this term stuck, was meant to revitalize aging cities, update them for the age of the automobile, and reverse the incentives draining cities of people and businesses. By the time the program came to an end in the country as a whole, in 1974, the federal government had approved over $13 billion worth of grants to over 1,200 municipalities across the country. New London was quick to take advantage of the new federal largesse. In 1950, City Council had applied for advanced planning funds, and a year later, New London set up its first redevelopment commission, which was an association of city officials and private citizens. The city's plans were humble at first, focused on creating more parking downtown, but Washington would only sponsor bolder thinking. And a new redevelopment commission established in 1958 launched what former Day reporter and historian Gregory Stone, who is here tonight, what he called, quote, a sweeping slum clearance program to make room in the cramped downtown for new buildings, wider streets, and off-street parking, end quote. An area along the city's decaying waterfront north of downtown, south of the highway, and east of Huntington Street was identified for clearance, and a prominent planner with a vast international portfolio, French-born Yale professor Maurice Redevelopment, was hired to plan it. A high-speed road, today Eugene O'Neill Drive, would replace ancient Main Street, linking downtown to the just completed turnpike in 1958. In place of decrepit 19th century wood frame structures, modern luxury, middle and lower income housing would be built on what was called the Winthrop Cove Renewal Project site, complete with a new shopping center, new industries and warehouses along State Pier. The city was quick to commence clearance, eventually demolishing around 690 homes and small businesses in this predominantly lower middle class and working class areas that were targeted. Urban renewal's record across the country was mixed at best. Clearing the land proved easier than rebuilding it. Renewal sites across the country stood vacant and desolate for a decade, an average, before they would eventually be rebuilt. Some of the plans did not materialize at all, and others were curtailed due to mounting local resistance. But in the meanwhile, the lives of hundreds of thousands of families were disrupted. Renewal projects across the U.S. collectively displaced, at minimum, 1/3 of a million families, and disproportionately targeted minority and lower class neighborhoods. Though displaced residents were meant to receive some combination of compensation, relocation assistance, or placement in public housing, these federally guaranteed measures were often too meager, did not materialize at all. This was true for New London as well. The Winthrop Cove plan displaced long-settled Polish-American and Italian-American communities already disrupted by highway and bridge construction. It took many years and was never quite realized as planned. The city followed it up into the mid-1970s with several new redevelopment projects for downtown and Shaw's Cove. By the time the so-called urban renewal era ended in New London, it had dramatically transformed the face of the city, much as it had throughout the country. So for this academic year, myself and a group of students and staff at Connecticut College have been working on a research project focused on tracing this history and its effects in New London in the broader context of the United States. So we are going to be building by early summer a website which will include the recollections of many former residents, some of whom are here tonight, and I hope to hear from them as well. But this is our very first public event, and for this event we have gathered here a group of planners and historians of planning to talk about, well, what was urban renewal and how does its legacy continue to resonate, not just in London, but in the country as a whole. So I wanted to quickly introduce the discussants, and then we will have a conversation. Lizabeth Cohen is a scholar of American history. She is the Howard Mumford Jones Professor of American Studies and a Harvard University Distinguished Service Professor in the Department of History at Harvard. From 2011 to 2018, she was the Dean of the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. Her most recent book, called Saving America's Cities at Logue and the Struggle to Renew Urban America in the Suburban Age, is a fascinating, really fascinating reevaluation of the career of one of the most prominent, sort of forgotten planners of the urban renewal era, who was responsible for many redevelopment projects in New Haven, Boston, and New York City. It was published hot off the presses, published this October with Farrar, Strauss, and Giroux. The book is already widely acclaimed, with reviews published in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Boston Globe, The New Yorker, and many other venues. And it is available for purchase just outside. So I encourage you to do so if you're interested. Professor Cohen's previous books include Making a New Deal, Industrial Workers in Chicago, 1919 to 1939, winner of the Bancroft Prize and a finalist for the Pulitzer, and A Consumer's Republic, The Politics of Mass Consumption in Post-War America. Michalowski is a professional planner and a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. He started his career in London in 1969 as a planning consultant with James Purcell and Associates, who were working on a revised master plan for the city and a renewal plan for downtown. So just at the tail end of the events that I was just describing earlier, the Wentworth Cove renewal plan. In 1971, he became City Development Administrator for the City of New London, a position he kept for the next 8 years until 1979. He went on to a 50-year career in planning, working with federal, state, regional, and municipal authorities, neighborhood organizations, community associations, nonprofit organizations, private development and financing sectors in Connecticut and the Northeast. He was a principal planner with Malone and McGrew, and a partner in Harold, Michalowski and Associates. He is recently retired and lives in New London. James Butler is also a member of the AICP, American Institute of Certified Planners. Since 1998, he is the executive director of the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments, the regional planning authority in Southeastern Connecticut. He has served as interim executive director of the Southeastern Connecticut Enterprise Region, the region's economic development organization, and the chairman of the Connecticut Association of Councils of Governments. In his 44 years of planning experience, he was also director of planning for the towns of Groton and East Lyme, and a senior planner for the Southeastern Connecticut Regional Planning Agency. In his free time, he pursued his passion for cross-country running by serving as Con's men's cross-country team coach for the past 30 years until retirement in